Good evening, friends. I wanted to invite you to join me for just kind of a rambly chat. It's late at night and I just felt like chatting, so if you want, join me, fellow introverts. I just wanted to talk. My work schedule is evening out now, so I think I can get back to filming reviews and posting them more regularly, I hope, but so that's one thing I'm looking forward to, but I just kind of wanted to chat about some things that don't really have a place in my normal reviews or maybe won't fit my usual review style. That's my thought anyway, so welcome to the chat. Grab a drink of your choice. Mine is water because I didn't feel like boiling water for tea or something cozy, so this is water with ice cubes, but hopefully you get something a little more tasty than that, and welcome to an introvert's evening in featuring Cubby. One thing that was kind of interesting that happened to me is somebody tried to catfish me by pretending they were Chris Pine. Obviously I didn't fall for it, but I just thought it was kind of amusing. I really like Star Trek, and so I like a lot of Star Trek photos on Instagram, and I guess somebody noticed me liking some with Captain Kirk, so they messaged me from an account pretending to be Chris Pine. They didn't even spell Chris Pine's name right, which was kind of funny. I played along at first just to see where it was going, but I knew it wasn't the real thing, and I blocked them eventually, but I just thought it was kind of funny. I don't know. People on the internet are interesting. Do you like Star Trek? If not, you should go watch it. It's very good. I like the original series. I actually got it on DVD, the complete original series, as kind of a Christmas, New Year's thing. It wasn't quite a Christmas present, but my family usually waits to buy gifts until after Christmas when things are on sale. So I got it kind of between Christmas and New Year's. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, the new movies with Chris Pine and Zoe Saldana and everything are really good too. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the movie The Fanatic, which is from 2019. It was recommended to me, and I don't always review things that people either request or recommend, but I usually look into them. I did end up watching this one, and it's a very interesting movie, and it's been on my mind since I watched it. I watched it a couple months ago, honestly. I tried to talk about it in a review back in January, and the file got corrupt or something. I don't know. I have a lot of tech problems, you might have noticed, so don't know what the deal is on that. But I don't know that the movie is truly a horror movie, which is why I kind of hesitate to talk about it in my usual review format, but I did want to talk about it, and the person who recommended it to me, they've been like, review it, so I figure, it is a movie that it resonated with me, so I thought I'd talk about it here. There are going to be spoilers for this movie, so I guess watch out if you don't want spoilers, but the very loose gist of it is that John Travolta plays this guy named Moose, who is autistic. He's a horror movie fan of these horror movies that specifically star this guy he likes named Hunter, this actor he likes named Hunter, and he works on Hollywood Boulevard as like a street performer, impersonator type character. Basically, Moose is a collector of horror movie memorabilia, and he's, again, a big fan of certain actors. And he goes to a signing to meet Hunter and meet him and have him sign stuff. And in the middle of Hunter's meet and greet type thing, his ex-wife, shows up right as Moose is getting to his table. So Hunter, goes out to talk to her, and Moose isn't really able to pick up on the social cues and follows Hunter out there, and kind of doesn't really, understand or respect his boundaries. And so Hunter kind of snaps at him because he's fighting with his ex-wife, and, finds Moose really annoying, and Moose is crushed by this. Moose is friends with a paparazza, is that the female paparazzo? And she directs him to this app that basically shows you where your favorite movie stars live, which, if that were a real thing, that would be an insane violation of privacy in my opinion. But anyway, he finds Hunter's home address and tries to go visit him, and things really escalate from there. It's a very interesting movie, and I wouldn't quite classify it as a horror movie, but it's got some elements that are similar to a horror movie, but I wouldn't quite classify it that way. But it's horror adjacent, so that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it, I guess. I watched that movie Uncut Gems recently. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's got what's his name? Adam Sandler in it, and it's kind of the opposite of The Fanatic in that I think they're both movies that were dealing with very, very specific lifestyles and very specific worlds that are not like kind of like a universal world, like Adam Sandler's character Howard Ratner is in like a gambler in the Diamond District of New York, which, you know, not a lot of people I think know about who aren't in the Diamond District, and Moose is in the Hollywood Boulevard Fanatic group. So they're very specific lifestyles. However, Uncut Gems is received very positively. It's considered like a great movie, and The Fanatic is a total flop. And I'm not going to sit here and pick apart why they are or are not, but I just thought it was interesting because when I saw Uncut Gems, it got me thinking about some themes that I've been thinking about in The Fanatic. And I guess this is me reaching, so if I pull a muscle, whoops, you can have a laugh at my expense. But this is just kind of something I was really thinking about because both of the movies had an ending that was just, it wasn't quite a satisfying ending in my opinion, but it was very interesting. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, is how the endings kind of represented the themes that I'm thinking of. So there's going to be some spoilers, I guess, so watch out for that. One of the questions that I think a lot of movies deal with is, you know, like justice and repose, and those two kind of in relation to each other. Maybe that's just something I interpret in a lot of movies, but it's something I definitely noticed a lot. So, spoiler alert, the main characters of both these movies are both harmed in a grievous way at the very end of the movies. And usually when a character is, you know, like shot or stabbed or like whatever at the end of a movie, it's supposed to kind of signify like justice being dealt or reaching a period of repose, I guess you might say. For example, it's like, you know, if they lived a really chaotic and stressful life that wasn't satisfying, it's like, oh, if they're dying, it's like, oh, now they can finally rest and have peace. Or like sometimes it's supposed to make the character seem pitiful and be kind of like a commentary on perception, like, oh, this character, he had such a pitiful life and he never caught a break, and even in death, you know, there's no dignity for him. Just this poor pitiful person. Like, what does that say about society? What does that say about, you know, our perception of justice and all of that? These movies both, I think, kind of defied what I would consider the traditional trajectory of this theme in movies. Here's where the spoilers come in. At the end of The Fanatic, Moose is, he basically, throughout the movie, he breaks into his idol's home and starts like, you know, like sniffing his shirts and like resting in his favorite chair and all of that. You know, he's not trying to be a creep, but it's definitely creepy. And when his idol yells at him one more time, Moose breaks in and ties him up in the bed while the guy's asleep. And then when he wakes up and finds himself tied to the bed, he sees Moose like flopped over on the floor like he's killed himself. And it's just like craziness. And Moose is trying to recreate scenes in the horror movies that his idol Hunter has starred in. And Hunter doesn't like it, and he eventually breaks free and like thinks Moose is being crazy, and he has a gun or something and he shoots Moose, and like Moose puts his hand up and like 3 of his fingers get blown off. And Hunter like jumps on him and like stabs him in the eye. And then Moose like escapes. So he's like wandering around crying, like holding this bloody hand with like stumps on it, and like his eye is like out, and like he never gets his eye back. He never gets his fingers reattached or anything. So, you know, kind of, it's not the same as like being shot and killed, but it's a very out of the blue kind of unexpected thing. It was a very, I mean, there were hints that it would come, but it was a very like shocking moment in the movie, and I do think it was well played, even if it was kind of weird and out of left field. I think this movie kind of ambiguously represented both the themes I just talked about, in that, you know, Moose, he had kind of a pitiful life. People would make fun of him. He only had one friend, Lee, who was the paparazza, and even she was kind of frustrated with him at sometimes because he couldn't, you know, like he wouldn't pick up on cues and stuff, and he would get kind of belligerent, you know, as we all do. But you know, it's like he didn't really live like a life full of joy like some of the other performers on Hollywood Boulevard would like make fun of him, and like he didn't make very much money and stuff like that. So it's like theoretically he's kind of breaking free from that whole like woe is me, you know, life is unfair, the pitiful guy dies trope, because it's like, yes, he gets injured and it's very awful, but he's presented with a new career opportunity. People are like, whoa, your prosthetic hand is so convincing, whoa. Like, and you know, he's like walking through the streets crying as he's injured, and people are coming up and taking selfies with him, and he's able to turn that eventually into a new career for himself. So it's like there's that prospect of him looking forward. And there's also the notion that he was kind of tormented by his fanatic love of this actor and the horror movies, and like now, you know, it's like they say never meet your heroes. Now that he met his hero and it went totally south, he's kind of free from that obsession, which I think will allow him to be safer and, you know, kind of branch out, I guess. So it's like in that way, the movie really flipped that kind of, you know, like a pitiful person dies a pitiful death kind of a trope on its head. That said, I don't think Moose necessarily wanted to have that kind of break from reality. Like his life was kind of pitiful, yes, but I think even if he knew that his life could, you know, go forward in a way that was, you know, better, I guess, I don't necessarily think that he would have wanted that per se. I know that part of his character is being autistic, and, you know, I'm not an expert on autism or anything, but I thought the way John Travolta played the character was that kind of the, you know, the stereotype in that he's a character who can't really pick up on cues super easily. He kind of needs routine in his life, and he gets very excited about certain things. And it just kind of made me feel like, I mean, I don't think the situation would have arisen necessarily if it weren't for his insane love of this actor, which, you know, he wouldn't have had that misunderstanding in the beginning that kind of sparked him trying to follow this actor around and like reconcile with him had he not been autistic and not been able to pick up on cues. And, you know, there are lots of non-autistic people who really can't read cues, so like don't take that as an insult or anything. But it's just kind of interesting how that kind of plays into the character and also the story, and how that kind of flips the script on its head, in my opinion. Uncut Gems, meanwhile, which again is a completely different film, it kind of eschewed both of these, you know, justice and repose themes, in my opinion. Howard Ratner lived a very fast-paced life. It was full of gaudiness, just so materialistic. It was so fast-paced. Ultimately, he had wealth and power, and while throughout the movie it showed him as a gambler on the verge of losing it, he never actually lost any of his wealth. It was like, oh, at one point it's like he's in debt, but no one had come to collect. He hadn't started losing any of his stuff, even though it's like, yeah, he's in debt. It's like he's always one step away from, you know, getting not in debt. So it was like, yeah, he was living on the edge, but he wasn't really suffering any of the consequences of his own actions. And so I feel like, spoiler alert, at the end he gets shot right after hitting it big and dies on screen, like right in the last 2 minutes of the movie or something. And Howard Ratner, it's like, is justice dealt? You might think, well, yes, because he lived a greedy life and, you know, a life without care for others, and now he's dead. But it's like he didn't really face the consequences of any of his actions except for death, and he died so quickly that one would argue he didn't really face justice, I guess, which I guess it doesn't really matter. And like, obviously he had a family. I don't think it was a great relationship with his family. Clearly there were issues, but they would still be sad for him. They weren't a completely estranged family at that point. By the same token, death is usually used in movies, when a main character dies, to be clear, is usually meant to show them kind of like accepting their life or coming into a sense of relief. And I think it's supposed to be a positive. And in this case, while one would argue that definitely death was much more peaceful than Ratner's crazy, busy, hectic life, he really thrived in the chaos that he created, and I do think he purposefully created that chaos. And I don't know. It was like, yeah, he does reach repose, I guess, but it's something I think he would hate being peaceful. Like, I don't think he's a person capable of being peaceful. There are people who are like that. I'm definitely more of an introvert. And I mean, you can be an introvert who likes chaos, so I guess I shouldn't use that phrase so lightly, but he's very chaotic, and even when he doesn't have incidences of craziness, he will just start yelling for no reason to up the energy and stress in the room. Like, that's his thing. So I think while one could argue he finds repose in death, it's like not a satisfying point, because he didn't want repose and repose doesn't suit him, and it's not like he reaches justice either. So I just thought that was kind of, I mean, it definitely was an impactful ending, and I think that's why a lot of people found the movie very interesting. But it was just, it's very weird. And to me, both of these movie endings really stick in your mind because they're so out of the norm regarding how movies use like the death or harm of a main character at the end of a movie. I think they both kind of take stereotype, take tradition, and just kind of fling it off their shoulder. And so I was very intrigued by these movies in how they handled that. So The Fanatic is ultimately very poorly regarded. It's got a lot of negative reviews. Some of the tags were like unconvincing, off-putting, weird, things like that, just kind of insulting, whereas Uncut Gems is receiving tons of critical acclaim. So I'm not trying to compare them in any way in that regard. I'm purely just talking about the themes here, and I do think that the movies dealt with themes in an interesting way. I was wondering too if the specific cultures that are shown in these movies have anything to do with the way that these themes kind of play out. The Diamond District in New York, I literally don't know anything about that, except for what I saw in Uncut Gems, which the reviews that other people have written say, oh, it's very accurate to like Diamond District Jewish culture, but you know, I literally didn't even know about that till I saw the movie. So again, I don't have a lot of knowledge about that, and I don't have much knowledge about Hollywood Boulevard street performers and their lives anyway. I don't really know about like horror collecting scenes or anything. So the worlds that these two characters were in were very, very specific ones. And I personally didn't really know anything about them before I went into the movies. So part of me is like, is that what added to kind of this surreal experience that kind of allows our characters to kind of just move away from these common themes? My thing though is like, you know, even when you take characters and put them in a very specific different society, it's like themes and like concepts of morals and like, you know, philosophies that humans create, they tend to be pretty consistent across stories, across storytelling mediums, regardless of country and setting. So part of me thinks that doesn't really have anything to do with it, but it is definitely something that I think about. You might say to me, Drewly, why do you keep talking about The Fanatic? It's not a horror movie. I know that, but someone recommended it to me and I did watch it, and it has been something I've really thought about. As far as like the actual like, you know, the production value of the movie, it felt like a high budget movie. It wasn't overly creative in any elements that I can remember, like its color palette or like the visual framing of the movie or the music or anything that I normally focus on. I mean, it just felt like an average movie in that regard, but the content of the movie, it felt like the premise felt like it could be a horror movie. It's just that because our main character was the one we were sympathizing with, it's like we knew that he didn't have any malice in his heart when he was creeping around. Like, it's like, yeah, that's definitely inappropriate and very creepy, especially if you're standing in other people's shoes. But it's like you knew he didn't have malice, so I feel like it was really hard to make this a horror movie as much as it was like an adjacent commentary on horror scenarios. And I'm probably gonna pull a muscle reaching for these themes, but it's just something to think about. And you know, sometimes when you're bored, you like to make a mountain out of a molehill. So I've been thinking a lot about this movie. I wanted to know if you guys have seen it. So I mean, I don't have a brand, but like I tend to think of myself as trying to review movies that aren't the most popular. Usually movies that are like TV movies that don't get a lot of acclaim, or you know, like low budget movies that, you know, independent filmmakers make and put on YouTube, things like that. I generally look at it like, you know, big movies, you know, popular movies. A lot of people talk about them, so why do I need to add my voice to the din? I promise I don't just watch, you know, low budget movies all the time. I've seen blockbuster movies. I've seen The Godfather. I've seen all the, you know, the big movies, The Shining, whatever. I feel like I'm trying to defend myself and I'm not, but I'm just saying, like, I don't only watch the movies that I talk about, like the movies in the genre I talk about, but I try to only talk about them because I want to stay in my lane. The Fanatic, I feel like, is definitely a movie that I don't hear that many people in my personal life talking about it. I don't know how much of a release it got. It's definitely infamous on the internet, but I don't know that many people in my real life who actually have even heard of it, even though it has John Travolta in it, who is, you know, a huge name star. So I thought that was interesting, but I just wanted to talk about it. Somebody did recommend it to me, and I did find it very interesting. And it is a movie that got a lot of flack, and I do think that there were some really disjointed and odd elements to it. And I'm not saying like, oh, this is a great movie or anything by any means, but it was interesting, you know. And like, things can be bad and like arguably of poor quality, but still be intriguing. You know what I mean? All the ice has melted out of my water. I'm kind of messing around with filming setup, so if in my next couple of reviews you see many different backgrounds, that's because I'm just playing around with like backgrounds, so like watch out. Ultimately, The Fanatic and Uncut Gems really don't have that much in common at all, honestly, so I'm not trying to compare them on any front. I just thought that the way that they dealt with the themes of, you know, justice and repose in the way that I typically have seen them represented in films were completely different. And the way that the movies dealt with them, even in contrast to each other, was very different. But I just found it really interesting, and I don't know, I just wanted to share my thoughts, I guess. Nobody asked for it. Well, one person asked. I dedicate this little chat to my friend Kang, who recommended that I watch The Fanatic, so this video is for you. You're the one who asked for it. But nobody asked for my opinion on Uncut Gems, so I'm not trying to get up on a soapbox or anything. I thought they were both very interesting films, and I don't know, I just feel like they took an ending that would be very expected, but it was also unexpected in the way that it folded out. I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say, but I hope you kind of get the gist of what I'm saying. They just kind of took a common theme and they embraced it as a plot element, but then kicked it back at the very last second. I think these themes wouldn't have worked if they were not character-based films, because these movies are not phenomenon-based films, they are character-based films. And I think horror tends to be usually one of two types, phenomenon-based or character-based. And, you know, you can have a good movie that's either. Sometimes I think trying to make a phenomenon-based horror movie that's really strong on the phenomenon with a weak character and make it character-based actually can weaken a movie. In some cases it can strengthen it, and in some cases it can weaken it. But these movies are both definitely purely character-based, and I think because they didn't try to mess too much with phenomenon as much, I think that's why they were able to kind of delve into these themes and kind of turn them on their heads, in my opinion. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. I would be curious if you have seen these movies, if you felt the same way I did about their themes. I would be curious to know as well if you liked The Fanatic or if you disliked Uncut Gems. I know that Uncut Gems is very popular, and popular might be the wrong word, but it's very highly regarded. And I can see why. It definitely took some very interesting artistic choices that I think enhanced the vibe of the movie, even though I personally didn't like that. And I can see why The Fanatic was kind of regarded negatively, but if you're one of the people who has an opposite opinion, I'd love to hear it. You know, I get just a little bit of flack because I often focus my reviews on, you know, movies that are low budget and, you know, usually have more of a chance of being bad than high budget movies or whatever. But and some people say I'm too mild in my opinions, which is like, I'm reviewing a TV movie. Like, how spicy do you want my takes? But I guess it's like, you know, there are some movies that are truly bad. Looking at you, Bye Bye Man. But you can always find something interesting, I think. Even if you're like, I still hate this movie, you can still sometimes find something interesting. You're not legally obligated to find a movie interesting, but I think it's fun to just think about movies and like pretend they're deep, whether they meant to be or not sometimes. So that's kind of just what I'm doing right now. I don't really have a lot else to say. Oh, this is kind of fun. This is kind of a stroke of good luck, which is nice considering, you know, a lot of the world is very hectic right now. I should turn that at an angle. There we go. I bought some used comics on eBay, and they got here not only a week early, but also I'm pretty sure I bought used because I bought for a used price and the ad said used, but when they got here, they were wrapped in plastic from like a manufacturer. So I guess this person bought the comics and never even opened them. So that was kind of exciting. So yeah, very excited to read those. I don't really like reading ongoing series as much. I like to wait until they're over and the verdict is kind of in. When I was younger, I was very into Vampire Knight, which is a shoujo manga from Japan, and I very distinctly remember like starting reading it when I was 12, and it'd been out for a couple years before that, and the final volume didn't come out until like 10 years later. It went on for a long time, and I really don't like the ending. I'm very cranky about it, and I'm like, I can't believe I sank, you know, like 10 years of my life into this. So now I like to just wait for something to come out and wait till it's all the way out and like hear the reviews and then read it as far as comics go. Or, you know what I mean? It's just like, even if it's a bad ending, I don't want to waste years of my life getting mad about it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I waited a long time and then I bought some used comics, but it turns out they're new. So that's kind of a cool stroke of luck, I think. Very exciting. Do you guys read any comics? What is your stance on waiting to see if they come out? Do you like to read them right away? I have some friends who are very up to date on like, they read superhero like Marvel comics, and so they're very like up to date on these comics, and they read the newest one and they keep track of when all of them are coming out and stuff like that. So, you know, different approaches for different people. I wanted to play Sudoku and I lost my Sudoku book, and I was like, I'm not gonna go buy one. I have one somewhere, and I couldn't find it, so I went out and bought one at the dollar store, and then almost immediately I found the one that I had before. You can see it's like falling apart, but I found it, so now I have 2 Sudoku books, so that's cool. I don't know. I don't really have much else to say. I just kind of wanted to chat with you guys, and I really did want to talk about The Fanatic because I've been meaning to talk about it for a while. So I'm glad I did. And I just kind of wanted to have a chat because I don't really do this very often, and it's kind of fun. It's different. It's a different style of editing, so I think it will be easier for me to get it out much more quickly than I typically put out reviews, because I do try to be very diligent when I edit them. I try to cut out all the places where I go, and stuff like that. I try to cut out the pauses so it's shorter, and I try to put information on the screen, like sum up my points across the bottom, or if I say an actor, I'll put their name here or whatever. And this is, I think, more informal. I've had to keep pausing it because I keep doing stupid things like kicking my foot out and knocking my camera over, or there's been a lot of ambulance sirens like tonight. So hopefully everyone's okay, but there's been a lot, so I've had to just kind of pause and wait for them to go by and cut those out. So there's definitely going to be a lot of cuts in this, I'm sure, when I eventually upload it. But anyway, thanks so much for having a cozy evening discussion with me. I hope that the rest of your night is great. All right, thanks so much, guys. Great chatting with you, and have a great evening. Bye.